Welcome to this presentation on Unit 4's Time and Expenses module. The first thing to mention is that it's a module within an overall product set, which also encompasses people planning and time management. But here today, we're just really going to focus on the Unit 4 Travel Expenses module, which is all about enabling people to improve the way you collect and process your employees' expenses. So some of the key features are, first of all, it's delivered as a service, so you don't have to worry about any technology. All you need is a browser to get onto the system and to use it. It's always updated with the rules, rates, and regulations in all the various countries that it operates in. And it enables you to embed your expenses policy into the application so that you get online policy validation. And it enables you to then not only have your expenses policy better enforced, but puts it through a workflow, which means that everyone can authorize the expenses according to the workflows that you set up. And key for those of you on Code of Financials or Unit 4 Financials, it's got a powerful integration engine. This is a Unit 4 module integrated in with the rest of the application set. So the key capability really is that most of your employees now have mobile phones with cameras attached. So we can use the mobile phones and the cameras to actually take a photograph of a expense or a receipt, and that can then be sent through to Unit 4's receipt recognition service, which will try and read as much data as it can off the expense, try and predict the type of expense it is, and actually then pre-populate the screen for the user to check or make any amendments. In some cases, it can't recognize all the receipts, so the system has a self-learning feedback and training mechanism, so the more you process certain types of receipts, the better it gets. Not only can receipts be captured through a mobile phone, you can obviously key your expenses in through the desktop, but also there's a mail forwarding facility such that if you, for instance, are buying train tickets via Trainline, or you rent a car and they send you a PDF by mail, you can actually get the receipt recognized by that without having to print the receipt out or the PDF out and then photographing it. It will automatically do it for you. So the key is to have automatic expense creation from images to put in your policy, travel and validation, not only for expense trips that you incur, but you can also set up the system so that you can get pre-approval of certain trips or expenditure. It's very flexible and very configurable. So the idea here is that actually you can get the right coding that you need, the right analysis onto the system. So for instance, if you record expenses by event or by project or by brand, as well as by cost code and department, you can set that up and actually have the system cater for it. If for those of you who operate expenses via per diems, it also has a full calculation of per diems. In terms of the system itself on the screen, you can choose what columns are editable. It can link to company credit card transactions. So for those employees with company credit cards, the system can take an automatic file from your credit card provider and match it to the receipt automatically. And that can save a lot of time and effort for the finance department as well as the users. You can have a look at the receipt, and you've got a complete overview of the entire workflow from user registration through to departmental approval. There may be various stages to finance working on it all the way through to posting. In terms of integration with Code of Financials, there's an off-the-shelf integration supported by Unit 4, which can take master data through from Code of Financials, such as account codes, employees, etc. Within the system, you set up your own workflow approval. It is different, a workflow approval system than you have in the Code of Standard Financials, but it's nevertheless very easy and very straightforward. And then once an expense has been approved by finance, when the finance team click it on into the workflow, it'll automatically be transferred into the Code of Financials in tray using Unit 4's web services. Then obviously you can use the standard payment facilities in financials to pay your employees, either weekly, monthly, etc., however you want to pay them. And there's a final stage where it updates the pay status back through into T&E. So an employee always knows where their expense is in the approval process. Is it down with the manager, is it with finance, or has it been actually paid and reimbursed? So by implementing the T&E system compared to typically what we see is a lot of people using spreadsheets or Word documents. First of all, key point is integration with Unit4 financials means less errors and less wasted time, automation through the whole process, synchronization, and good support. Briefly mentioned better handling of company credit cards. A lot of people we talk to does take them a lot of time and effort to try and match corporate card transactions and make sure that they are being processed accordingly. And then more flexibility to embed and handle your expenses policy, leading to higher enforcement and improved ability to manage expenses. So, for instance, the ability to support cash advances for overseas trips or travel request approvals, or setting certain limits. Air travel, you can only spend so much within Europe, so much within international, or so much on a hotel. And obviously the ability for finance to recode and split expenses to other projects and departments, as well as to check the VAT and that people have recorded their expenses correctly. It's a standalone module, so as you'd expect, there's loads of users using the software who don't use Coda Financials, but here are some of the better known ones who use Coda Financials. So people like Visit Britain, which is the British Tourist Board, or Wallenius Wilhelmsen, they're a big shipping line and they use the software internationally. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to cover on this, and what we'll do is we'll hand over to my colleague Ben, who'll take me through the first part of the presentation.
Thanks, Phil. So we're going to run through a typical scenario of an employee inputting and submitting their expenses, then their department manager approving those expenses, and then finally the expense claim being double checked and processed by finance. So for this demo, I'm going to be Eric, the employee. So hopefully you can see my iPhone screen, and this is the T&E login page. So I'm going to log in as Eric. This is Eric's home screen. And first, I'm going to open my expense report. So these expense reports are the equivalent of the form your Excel spreadsheet your employees might fill in. You can set up these expense reports for several reasons. They could be for a particular project or trip, or for a bit based on a certain period of time, like weekly or monthly. So I've set up one here, which is just a trip into London. So I'll open this expense form and start adding some expenses. So I'm going to add an expense, create from receipt. So I've got a meal receipt here. Let's take a snap of this. There we go. Right, that's now loading the photo in and running through the OCR engine to identify the quantity, currency, the date, and any other sort of information that's in the text on the receipt. So that's now loaded in, and I've got a red notification. So I'll click on this notification. Have an error. Please confirm expense. Okay, so it thinks it's meals lunch. It was correct, but I just need to approve that. There we go. So it was correct. I also have an orange warning here. Let me click on that. So we've set up in this demo system that the expense policy allows up to £20 for lunch, and this receipt is for £44.90. So it's an amber warning, so this will still pass through, but yeah, it's just a warning to let you know that you've overspent, and obviously this will be flagged to the next person in the line, my approver. So that's my first expense added. I'm going to add another one manually now. I'm going to add my mileage. So create manually, mileage private car. Now this is using the Google Maps functionality. So you just type in a postcode or start typing in an address. So that's Millennium head office, and let's say I drove to St Pancras station. There we go. So this is set up as 45 pence a mile in the UK, so it's 117 miles, it says, at 45p, so reimbursable is 52.92. So I click save, and that's just added that to my expense report. If you need to go back into any of these and edit them, you can. So I'm going to go into this meals lunch, edit, and let's say this wasn't meals lunch. Actually, this was client entertaining. So now that I've changed that to client entertaining, we've set it up to record some anti-bribery details. So this is now asking me for a description. So if I add lunch with Unit 4, and also I have to name the people and companies that I had lunch with, who I was entertaining. So you put in here Mike Etling from Unit 4. It also remembers people you've previously entered. So if I click on this, I can just pick another person there. So here we go. I've got Peter Smith from the BBC and Mike Etling from Unit 4. Okay, I'm happy with that. So I click the tick, and that is now added that to my expense report. So now I'm happy with the expenses and want to submit this. So I just click the submit button there at the bottom right. You can send a message if you want. So I'll just add a message here. Please approve ASAP. Right, and that's now been sent off to my department manager for approval. You can see the top right tab here, submitted. If I click on that, you can see where all your previous expenses are through the workflow. So you see the top one there sitting with my department manager. The one below that, they've been approved and they're sitting with finance. And if you go all the way through the workflow, see at the bottom there, paid and processed, that's 50. So that's 50, they're being completely reimbursed back to me. So you can see that was very quick and easy for me to input my expenses. I have full visibility of where all my expenses are through the workflow. And now I'm going to log out and log back in as Danielle, who is Eric's department manager. So log in as Danielle. So Danielle has the same home screen as Eric because she can put in her expenses too, but you saw some blue notifications pop up at the bottom and also a little orange dot by my home thing on the top left. And I have some notifications. So if I click on these notifications, you can see Trip to London by Eric has just come in for me to view and to approve. So I click on that. I can see all the details of the expenses there, but if I also click on the 3 dots at the top right and click show print, you can see that in a sort of PDF type format. And if I scroll across, you can see all the receipts, all the mileage, everything is added there. So if Danielle is happy with that, she can just click approve. And that has now gone off to the finance department for the final approval. So as you can see, that was very simple, not only to input expenses, but also approve them as well, all just on your mobile device. I'm going to hand you back to Phil now, who's going to play the part of Fiona in finance. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. So now let's look at the system from Fiona in Finance's perspective. Now, typically she'll be sitting at the desktop, so she'll access it through the desktop interface, but so could have Eric and Danielle, and the menus that they'll see will be tailored to them. So if I go in as Fiona of Finance, I'll see a menu that actually has an Approved Finance tab, which enables Fiona to do the approval, and automatically sets up here the view to see any expenses that have come through the workflow and need attention from the finance team. And here we see the one that Eric's just entered for 97.82. And if you look here on the right-hand side, you've got the various workflow steps. So if I wasn't happy with this, I could just put it back to Eric, or I could just put it back to Danielle and add a message to ask her to query some things. If you want to look at a quick preview, I can pull up the report here and I can see very quickly that Eric had a meeting with Unit 4. Those were the people that were entertained, and this is a summary of his trip. and you can also then scroll through any other expenses that are sitting there as well. Any messages will show up here in blue. And if there's a warning, for instance, something's slightly out of policy, but you've allowed it through, you can have a look at it. And for instance, in this case, we allowed €60 for dinner, but the managers approved it, so that's fine. And it obviously was a special item. Any items in grey are things that I can action. So if I pick that particular expense up, I can now see the detail on it. If I want to, I can create a little PDF to actually see the expenses with all the receipts attached, which is quite a nice way of looking at it in its entirety. I could look at it receipt by receipt as well, but here we see that same form. I can see that Ben went to the old drum and also did some mileage, and the map comes up. So very nice, easy way to check anything. If I'm actually going to work on it, I'll turn it into waiting for control by finance. The reason we have those different steps in the workflow is you might have multiple people in the finance function who are able to action and approve claims. This has brought it up, and because I'm in finance, I've got my security set that I can change things. I can obviously have a look at the participants. I could change the coding. I might make something, change the VAT lines, or I could recode it to different projects if they've got it wrong. So my role here in finance is to just double check everything and make sure everything's okay. I mean, I could, if I had the security, actually change the reimbursable so that I could actually force a different value from the receipt to be paid. It's solely up to me on the setup and what I want to do. You also have a full audit trail as to what's happened, so I can see that this has been a message has come through from Danielle, but there's also a change log. So if anyone has changed any information on the way through, we have that stamped as well, which is pretty good from an audit trail point of view. I can add multiple attachments here if I wanted to. I've got the individual receipts down here, and I can obviously go back to the expense item itself. So in finance, I've got full control. For those of you on Unit4 financials, you will see that it behaves according to the style guide. So I've got the ability to split the screen, favorites. I've got my menu items can come down here, but also on the top here. So actually, if you're using it in conjunction with Unit4 financials, it's very good and very easy to work your way around. And here, the default is that I'm looking just at claims that I'm working on, but I could also flick those switches and actually see what's in the pipeline if I want to chase. So actually, there are quite a few expenses sitting down here that people have registered, and we can have automatic emails chasing people up to do their expenses, or you can just go down and chase them yourself. It's really up to you. So if we look at Eric's trip to London for 97.82, I'm pretty happy with that. Again, it's really up to you as what you do, and that's the change log that I was talking about before. So we can see that Fiona Finance actually changed a value of the date because the date wasn't within the range that was specified. When I'm ready, I can then post that through into Code of Financials. I could just send it through to reimbursement, or I could approve it and then send it through. It's really up to you. And then once I've clicked that through, that will then go through to Unit4 financials. So if I pick up Unit4 financials here, and typically as a finance user, I would have it up in the background anyway, but what would happen when I send things through for reimbursement is going to pick up a Unit4 web services, which is the right way of interfacing through to Unit4 financials, and post that document through. I've got an inquiry here looking at transactions today, which will then pick up anything that's been posted today, and here it is. It's from Eric, the employee, for 97.82, which is what we need to reimburse him with. When you set up the web service, you can specify what fields come across. So do you want to populate external references, want to 6, what goes where. And the default is to put it through to the in tray, but you could have it going through to the books. Most people prefer to see it on the in tray first, and then we can see the first expense line is paying Eric, and the other is analysis down to the sales department. Now, the nominal code and the departmental code are picked up automatically from T&E. We could actually analyze costs in the GL down by employee if we so wanted to. We haven't got it set up in this example, but we could. And obviously, once this is posted to the books and paid, that pay status would change, and then that would, in the interface, post back through to T&E to notify it as to what the pay status is. So it's as straightforward as that. The employees can come in finance, see what they need to do and work on it. You've got some messaging going on up here, so you've got tasks of what's ready for approval. If someone has put in a new claim, you'd also see that coming through as an alert. If we look at the main menu, Fiona in finance can also enter her own expense reports. It looks like she's also a departmental and project manager, so she can approve things as well as approving in finance. And there's also some analysis based on the roles she's got. So if I look at the expense reports, and that will then, based on the selection criteria we've got here, actually show all the data. So here I'm looking, and this is a pivot table. Here I'm looking by employee, by expense type, the amount and what's reimbursable. But if I wanted to, I've got the ability to then pull different analysis down. So I might want to see that by department. So I've got my costs of Eric by department or going through. Now, of course, up here, I can just look at those areas. So if I'm getting towards month end, that'll just show me what's out there and hasn't been processed yet. And so I can base my accruals based on that. And again, this is a nice way of finding out who's got information that needs to be chased up. And we can set up automatic emails, or you can trace people up manually. It's really up to you. So I think that's really all I wanted to cover at the moment in terms of the finance user. A variety of expense reports here sitting as well, such as VAT reporting and also P11D reporting. But in terms of taking us through from a process from entering an employee all the way through to having it approved both by a departmental manager and by finance and sent through to reimbursement, that's all there is to it. The system's very easy to set up and configure. To give you a bit of insight into this, I'll just sign on as an administration user. And you can see here we've got a setup menu. So effectively, when we're configuring the system, a lot of it comes pre-configured, and organizations set up their employees, the details of their employees, what the codes that they're going to be used, and what the posting codes are in the nominal. You can set up user-defined claim forms. So a claim form, as Ben said previously, is very similar to maybe an Excel sheet or a Word document that you might have. These are user-definable, and you can set different workflows for each different claim form that you want. So you could, for instance, have a claim form just for use by the IT department, which only has expense types that they're allowed. And then on the expense types, the system again comes pre-configured with all of these expense types. You can change them or add your own. So it's completely user-definable. And here are a list of the valid expense types. So private car, first 10,000 miles, what the GL code in, I'm going to post that to. So nominal code 1257. Any control codes you want. So for instance, you might say lunch, you saw it was maximum value of £20. That's where you specify it. And you can either say it's a warning or an error. If it's an error, then you can't actually process above that. And here you can just create the VAT, the rate, and other configuration around the particular expense type that you want. You can set up different access groups, so you can put people into different security groups or control groups, so they only have access to certain forms. And you've also got the ability to set up projects, if you like, where a project could have various phases and subphases. And against all of these, you can set up the relevant nominal codes that you'll be posting to when it gets to Unit4 financials. So really, the setup is pretty straightforward, very easy to get going and to work to your requirements. It is multiple company, also multiple jurisdictions, so you can have people using international. I think we discussed before, people like Wallenius Wilhelmsen operate in about 60 different countries. So that's really all I wanted to cover on that bit. Thank you very much for your attention, and if you've got any queries, I'd be glad to help address them. Thank you very much.